On behalf of the, what are we calling it now, School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, I would like to call this meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Beebe? Ms. Beebe is present. Mr. Bennett? Mr. Bennett is absent. Ms. Bophy?
Here.
Ms. Bophy is present. Ms. Bradford?
Here.
Ms. Bradford is present. Ms. Dastu?
Here.
Ms. Dastu is present. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Mr. Gio?
Here.
Mr. Gio is present. Ms. Hill?
Present.
Ms. Hill is present. Mr. Lee? Mr. Lee is absent. Ms. Orange Jones?
Present.
Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Romer? Mr. Romer is present. You have a quorum.
Can we have the first item, please?
First item is on page 1, item 2.1, consideration of the 2012 request for applications for types 2, 4, and 5 charters. The department recommendation is to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion from Ms. Dastu. Do we have a second? Ms. Bradford? Do we have any questions?
Can I just make a comment?
Ms. Dastu, please.
I just want to commend department staff, and I think Mr. Baxter gets a lot of credit here for putting forth an RFA that our staff and BESE members that I've talked to are very, very impressed with, and particularly in the targeting the way that you have, and acknowledging the work of the group in the community groups in New Orleans and taking their input. This is, according to our staff, one of the best RFAs they've ever read. They've looked at it to see if it was aligned with our existing policies. They say that it is, and it is responsive to both the board's previously stated concerns and also the group that was convened out of New Orleans. So I just really want to commend the work. It's very, very good. And Superintendent, you get some credit too.
Well, I'm going to leave that one alone. I thank you for saying that, first of all, Ms. Dastu, and I too want to commend the team. I think that the board should know that this reflects what I think are two significant shifts. One is the shift to, with the Recovery School District, and it is Parker Baxter and Raphael Gang, but it's also Superintendent Dobard and Adam Hoff and the RSD team as well, really working hand in hand to say, okay, where do we anticipate the greatest need in terms of student achievement? And it's not about saying, well, we're going to create a charter school. That's not really our job on this block, et cetera. But it's more saying, let's focus the state's authorizing efforts on those areas of the greatest academic need, and let's be upfront about that on an 18-month timeline. So we've got a ways until these schools are going to start, but let's invite organizations to apply in the areas where there's the greatest need. Second, that you're right, Ms. Dastu, the team, both at the RSD as well as the state team, have taken the time to work with stakeholders, and obviously New Orleans is the area where there are the greatest number of stakeholders around process. I think that in the end, of course, our recommendations won't respond to every single concern every single person has, but I think they strike the right balance of a good standard process that takes into account individual feedback. And so, for example, in the past, when the NACSA group has issued their final recommendations, that recommendation has been translated into a department recommendation to BESE. And then you get, what we typically get, which is a lot of feedback at the table. What we've instead tried to do now is to say, okay, the NACSA will introduce their recommendation. Subsequent to that, the groups will have a chance to respond formally, and then the department will issue its recommendation to the board, which I think is the right balance of saying, we as the department need to come to the board and own the recommendation. That should take into account not just the views of the applicant, but the views of the applicant in response to NACSA to clarify the issues that have been raised, because I think that context has been lacking sometimes. So I agree that the staff, I think, has done a good job, and I think this is a good step forward.
Ms. Beebe.
Mr. White, on page 1, under 2.1, it says that in other words, if there are available facilities, those will be allocated to the individuals who are wanting to implement charters, and then they will be eligible for incubation funding. Could you clarify this?
I'll ask him. Ms. Beebe, where are you reading this, please?
This is in the 2.1 request for type 2, 4, and 5. It's page 1 of your book, School Innovation and Turnaround.
The wording that you were referencing is on page 1?
Clarification about the available facilities, or school districts obligated to relinquish their unoccupied facilities, and if so, what process do we have in place to address it?
School districts are obligated in the law already to offer available space at a market price to type 2 charter schools. There are a variety of things in connection with charter schools that districts are required to do under the law. It's having nothing to do with this, and that is being reaffirmed here. Other things that districts have to do are, for example, operate their own charter authorizing process, and our subsequent communications with districts will be about what their obligations are. We're currently developing a memorandum to communicate to district what their obligations are under the law, not under BESE policy specifically, but under the law, and that would be one of them.
Well, hypothetically, if you had 2 charter entities wanting to use a building, would there be a bid process to give award to the highest bid? I know you said it's at the going market rate.
We don't make business decisions for districts at the state level, as you know, but the state is the local district would be able to operate whatever process they choose fit. The law simply states that for when there are type 2 charter schools and there's available public facility space, the offer of first refusal at a market rate shall go to a type 2 charter school.
Okay, and the incubation funding, where is this money coming from?
It's a combination of school improvement grant funding, which is federal funding designed for school turnaround, Race to the Top funding, which again is federal funding designed for state turnaround, and a percentage of 8G funds from the state.
And then with regard to the applicants and the independent review team, I just need to take a step back in time and using the examples of the Delta and Tangipahoa group. There was the NASCA, the National Association of Charter Review Board, as well as an independent review board. And so are we maintaining that process? Is that?
Yes, the review process remains. And then ultimately that review translates into a recommendation from the department. In other words, that is in essence a guidance for the department. The department then makes a recommendation to this board as to, yes, this board. But the change that we are making is that there will be a formal process whereby when the NACSA group makes their recommendation subsequent to their review, that the applicant is able to respond to that formally to the department to say, well, look, they said this is the case, but it's really not, or let me clarify this point that may have gone unclarified in the NACSA review.
So I don't know if this is the time to address this question, but the charter school authorizer, I'm trying to get my head around that. So in the process, where does the charter school authorizer come into play? Because if I am a charter, I'm interested in opening a charter, then I'm going to submit my proposal to the National Charter Association Review Board or to your department, and then you will have NASCA review it. And so just explain the
Sure.
charter authorizer, please.
The BESE is the charter authorizer in this case. There is as are local school boards. Local school boards are required under the law to operate a process for the authorizing of type 1 charter schools. If an applicant for a type 1 is rejected, they may come to the state board and petition to have a type 2 charter be authorized by this board. The recent law was passed to say that groups may bypass the local board in the event that the local board has a low letter grade or does not have a process. And it is fair to say that right now the majority of districts do not have a formally well-advertised charter school process. We hope that will change. I'm sure it will. They then come to, in response to this document, this RFA, come to the state board through this process and say, we would like to apply for a charter school to the board. We, as the administrative group, act on behalf of BESE to facilitate that process, and we then take those applications and send them to NACSA for NACSA's review. We conduct our own interview, as you say, and NACSA 2 interviews, and then NACSA returns a recommendation to us, the department. We use that, along with information that we've gathered through the application as well, to make a recommendation to BESE. BESE then has the ability to approve, not approve, approve the conditions, et cetera, and that's the process.
But the charter school authorizer, in reading the law, I understood it that it would usurp BESE's authority, that they would indeed be the individuals to authorize, like.
I think you might be referring to the local charter authorizers construct that's
Yes.
created in new statutes. We don't, the BESE board does not yet have regulations or a process up because that legislation hasn't been signed into law yet. When it's signed into.
But in concept, could you expand on it? So in essence, the role of the charter school authorizer would then take the place of BESE's role in the authorization of?
No, in the legislation that was recently passed in the legislature, BESE would have the ability to say, in such region, we want such group that's applied to be an authorizer to be able to authorize charter schools as well as BESE, on behalf of BESE, that BESE will review such the charter schools that are created by such a body, and if they are of high caliber, then that group will be able to continue to authorize schools. If not, then BESE will not allow them to continue to operate schools as prescribed in the law. But we're a ways away from that, in that we that legislation has yet to be signed into law.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gill.
Mr. Garvey, on page 1, it references the areas of high priority need throughout the state,
Yes, sir.
and it has North Central Louisiana. Is that intended to be inclusive of Northeast Louisiana?
I think we don't in the RFA document we outline specific parishes, but we wanted more to be broadly descriptive rather than to narrow at the outset the focus. It's fair to say we have a number of DNF schools concentrated in a set of parishes in North and Northeast Louisiana, but it's also fair to say that we know that there are some areas where there are not. We did not include those areas in the RFA, for example. So if there were not low-performing schools, we did not include it. And you'll see in the document that we sent that to the board under separate cover that there are parishes outlined on those charts that say these are the parishes that we're focused on for this piece. We just called it Central and North Central Louisiana because it includes a variety of parishes.
Okay. Board members, any further questions? We do have a speaker on this item, Mr. Lee Mayer from the Assumption Parish School Board.
Okay. And I just want to say one thing right now, and please don't let it count against my 3 minutes. I may sound like I'm
Can you turn microphone?
turn me on.
There you go.
All right.
Thank you.
Good. I'm not in objection to everything that this board's trying to do. I'm not in objection to everything that the legislature tried to do. I'm just looking for some equity. As a stakeholder, will we get a copy of this eventually, you know? Stakeholders are left in the dark. One person got mad at me one time, and they said, well, you just mad because nobody ever invites you to those meetings that they talk about when they talk about educators. There are a lot of educators out there who would like to be involved. But see, I have to depend on what people tell me about the charter school program and how the charter school program may be using, like in the New Orleans area, you may have been incorporating the school board's grades or accomplishments with the charter grades. I may be wrong, okay, as far as, but according to some statistics that I have, 60 of the failing schools that are in Louisiana alone in the recovery school district are charters. So if we're going to start letting more charters out, and we're supposedly just successful educators, I don't know who a successful educator is supposed to be, but I was sitting in this audience one day when a group from New Orleans got turned down, and their application from the year before was evaluated again by the group that turned them down and fixed it for them, and then they found something else wrong with it. So it makes me wonder, when you just okayed a whole handful of them and with no discussion whatsoever about their ability or accountability, what are we doing? The money that we're spending, and you're getting ready to talk about the capital outlay. Where's all that money coming from that can go into New Orleans? What about the rest of Louisiana? What about those poor people up in past 190? Thank you.
If I could just maybe provide some factual background in response. First of all, I really do agree with Mr. Mayor's comments around teachers being involved, and I think that we do have to start seeing charter schools as one way, among many others, for teachers to come together and do something that they've always conceived of doing, which is running schools. And that really was the original conception of charter schools, was to be teacher-led schools that are freed from the bureaucracy. And I do think we need to start thinking of that, so I really appreciate that sentiment. On a couple just points of background, charter schools are actually improving their SPS at 3 times the rate of traditional schools in our state. That's not to say they're all good. It's certainly not to say that, but it is to say that they are making fast progress. Secondly, that the recovery school district schools there are many of them that are D's and F's, no doubt about it. 80% of them roughly entered as F's. Now roughly 30% are F's. So there's been tremendous progress under primarily the charter school structure, and we need to continue to do more. But I think the reason that they are D's and F's, many of them, is not because they are newly created D's and F's. It's because they are recovering from being all F's. And that's the current situation there. And finally, I would just say that Louisiana charters have done, by and large, better than national charters, whereas charters nationally tend to do no better than peer schools. Louisiana schools actually have tended to achieve at 3 times the rate of success against peer schools as have national charter schools.
Okay. Do we have a card on this issue? Very good. Thank you. We have Mr. Wayne Free from Louisiana Association of Educators.
Wayne Free, Louisiana Association of Educators. I come because of my concern for a statement that Mr. White just made, and that was that charter schools are approving at 3 times the rate of the schools across the state. And that is true if you ignore the fact that 40% of the charters were reconfigured and were not figured in. Otherwise, it is just slightly better than the state average and falls somewhere right about the lower third. And I would like Mr. White to clarify the fact that many of the schools that are reconstituted do not have a score, and that the data he's providing is inappropriate, and there are lots of places to get that, and I'll be happy to provide it for this board if necessary.
You know, I have to say, and this is an area where many of us have had disagreements over the years, the argument that when you take a failing school, reconstitute it, and thus those schools' SPSs aren't counted for a year, actually you would imagine that that would count against you in terms of doing well, not for you, because those schools were failing the year before. So actually it's not that proves somehow that the charter schools weren't working. They were failing the year before under the previous governance structure. Secondly, a lot of those schools aren't counted because they don't have grades that they're testing yet. They've started it with grades kindergarten 1 or 2. So I don't dispute that there are some schools that don't have school performance scores. I don't understand how that's a justification for why those schools somehow wouldn't be working when they're simply taking over for schools that weren't working before. But you know, I'm happy to get some of the issues clarified. I know that Mr. Whittinghill has raised some of the points around data, and we're running analysis to look into that question.
Mr. Free?
The question of whether or not you should include those schools is a valid question if you didn't report it in such a way that hides what really is going on, and that's the critical issue here. For example, if you look at those 40 schools that were reconstituted and not scored, and average what their score would have been if you had moved on and provided that information, then you would have a very different report. Now, as a math teacher, if I were to report, if one of my students were to report to me the way you have been reported to, I'd have to go back and reteach the whole concept of how do you average and how do you report. Now, it's one thing to say that they're 3 times better. The truth is that those were struggling schools to begin with, and they have improved. And that's a positive. But to set and say that they're 3 times better in the state is a total misconception, and that's what's causing the problem throughout the state. At least be accurate. And if you would like the help of experts in terms of doing it, we'll be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any further questions?
Mr. Garvey,
Ms. Beebe?
I just want to say that I think the frustration comes into play when we hear the emphasis on charters and very little discussion about helping us improve our traditional public schools. And then we talk about all the money, we see all the money being expended in the charter areas. It's just very disturbing to me coming from the traditional public school sector. And I would like to have more discussions. And I will say later on, Mr. White, that, you know, you also represent traditional public schools.
Which money is it you're talking about, just out of curiosity?
The money that we're talking about when we are giving these startup dollars to charters, and you say that they come from the AG and these different grant sources.
Would you have the same concern with the Circle grant that's going to be presented later, which only includes 1 charter group and includes actually 16 traditional school districts?
But Mr. White, the point I'm making is there is frustration among those in traditional public schools that, and not only with you, the legislature, with BESE, the focus is on charters and vouchers. Why not help provide the assistance, the expertise, the leadership that, you know, you have all these, you're surrounded by all these people to help perfect the instruction in traditional schools. And I know you're saying that we're going to achieve the magic through this teacher evaluation program. Well, I beg to differ. We've been evaluating for years. And it's not just going to be about the teacher evaluation process.
Well, I think, so let me say this, and then I don't want to get in an argument about it. I have similar frustrations in that I think that your point is right, that we do need to focus on the majority of the system. And I think that actually the majority of the meetings that we have here, the vast majority, are taken up with the traditional system. And the vast majority of the dollars that we're discussing are taken up with the traditional system. And then when a charter item comes up, people say, well, you're disproportionately focusing on charter schools. Well, we've talked about the Compass system. We're going to talk about the Circle grants. We talk about the Common Core standards. We talk about our network structure, ACT, advanced placement, pre-K, all of these things that we do for the traditional system. And then when $200,000 for charter school comes up, we act as if it's somehow like this abnormal focus on charter schools. Meanwhile, we're sending $30 million to our traditional system in a literacy grant. So I just don't know if the facts support what you're saying, although I emphasize sometimes the media does create the impression that there is that focus, and I regret that.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any further questions? Hearing none, do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Next item is on page 10, item 3.1, consideration of an update report on capital projects. The department recommendation is to receive.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Dastu.
I'd like to make a motion to to receive this item, but there is a specific item because of the amount of the change order that will require to go before joint budget, and therefore it's our understanding that joint budget would like to see the board specifically act on that. Board members, it's the Booker T. Washington, so if we could approve the item except for the Booker T. Washington contract, and then we'll deal with that separately, I believe it will put us in a good position to go before joint budget.
Okay, I think it would be following what you just described if we hear the report and then accept the report and then take your motion up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I just wanted to lay the groundwork.
Do we have a motion to receive the report?
That's
We do.
my
We have a
motion.
second? Ms. Hill, thank you. Do we have any questions from the members, or do you want to hear from the staff? Let's hear from the staff. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Lona Edwards-Hankins, the Executive Director for Capital Projects for the Recovery School District. We have $407 million in open contracts, and our change order rate to date is right at about 2%. In April, we held a summit with all the various agencies in the city and the state who will be impacted by our construction schedule going forward, to give them a heads up as to what their workload will be looking like in the next 3 years as we roll out the 50 projects for Phase 2, and as an effort to try to streamline some of our work processes so that we make sure that we are giving, let's say, the fire marshal the deliverable he needs to review the plans in an appropriate manner, such that when we're in construction, we can minimize some of the changes we're often seeing. So that's our forward look. And that's it for the report.
Okay, BESE members, do we have any questions for the staff?
Are we going to take up the separate issue that Ms. Dastu?
Yeah, and I actually have some explanation on it, board members, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to give the board members.
Please pass it out.
On the item of rules.
Did you take action to receive the report?
Not yet. The motion is on the floor right now.
I think should we vote on the first motion and then?
Okay, but
you do your job, Mr.
on the
Chairman.
first motion, we do have a speaker,
Okay.
and I think we had a handout from the speaker. Did that handout get passed out? Bridget? Do we hand out the? Thank you. Okay. We have Ryan Bennett from Einstein Charter School.
Good morning. I'm here representing Einstein Charter School. As you know, our authorizer is OPSB. However, we are in an RSD building, and so I wanted to comment on the current project plan proposal for a new roof and fixing some subsidence issues. Essentially, our school, our work with our school goes back to around 2008. We've had consistently troubles getting our school fixed. We've had a leaking roof for the last 3 years, which was finally repaired partially this last summer. We've been working closely with the RSD to try and get some critical issues fixed. You'll see, you should have in your hand right now a list of critical issues that are still yet to be fixed with our school. They go beyond the roof and the subsidence issues. The subsidence issues are, one, just unsafe for our children. There's holes along our building, and additionally our sidewalks are just unsafe for our children. Secondly, from the temporary repair to the roof this last summer, there's still mold issues in the building where the leak was leaking into our classrooms. We had trash cans collecting water for the last 3 years until that was temporarily fixed. To go back, just to give you a little history, originally the building was slated in 2008. We were slated $23 million for a new building at the Village de l'Est building. That was reallocated elsewhere, which we're fine with. We just want to ensure our children in our building kind of have the facilities to learn. Part of the current proposal, also not in this issue though, is to tear down portables in the back of our building, which have been there since the late 90s. We agree they should be torn down. They're unsafe and they shouldn't be there. However, the current proposal is to put blacktop down. Given the success of our school, we believe that we need additional capacity to serve more children and would like additional classrooms instead of blacktop being put down, whether that be portables or whatnot. Additionally, we currently as a school do not have room or capacity to have all of our children in one place as a school community. We are proposing and would like a temporary gym structure in the back, just a covering over our playground, not an enclosed structure, but a structure where our kids could be outside during inclement weather, whether it would be raining or whatnot. If you can see, all the other lists include items including we do not have a walk-in refrigerator or walk-in freezer for our lunch program, and a list of other items. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett, if I understand right, one of the things that you were concerned about is that this is a OPSB charter in an RSD facility.
That is
And
correct.
I think one of the questions you had asked me earlier was whether the RSD could transfer that property to OPSB, where you think the coordination might be better since it would be coordinated with your authorizer.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. Can we get any information on that, Mr. Superintendent? Is that possible, or is that something that does not work well, or?
It's certainly a new request. My office was not aware of this request before your appearance today, and I've had conversations. I have not had a status update before today as to this. I certainly say we could take it under consideration. I would prefer to circle with the RSD team to come back to the board with an update as to the status of these particular repairs. Just to give some context, the building itself is a part of the issue. It's my understanding that some of the issues with the roof actually had been addressed, and you're telling me today that they've not been.
Temporarily, there was a patchwork done this last summer, which still has some issues, but the new roof has not been put on.
Okay.
If I may,
Yeah.
we've received bids on both the subsidence and the roof. At the request of the charter, we were told to hold up to specifically do that work during the summertime such that it didn't interfere with the educational performance.
Yeah. So that when
That is
we
correct.
met with your principal and your board chair in October or whatever that was, we then responded, did the work around the roof, and went out and tried to scope out what the further process would be. And tell me where I'm getting this wrong.
No, that is
then
correct.
we put that job out to bid. You told us you did not want us to move ahead until the end of the school year, and I understand, Ms. Hankins, that we do plan to move ahead. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that is correct.
So what's the issue?
The issue is the other issues that are not currently outlaid and to be repaired or fixed in our building beyond the roof or the subsidence issues.
And can you just give an example of that?
The issues currently being the issues that are outlined in the report that the.
And Ms. Hankins, are these issues that of which the RSD is aware?
I haven't seen that list. I don't know if someone else on the team has seen it, but keep in mind, we do have money allocated for the refurbishment work. That's to include the exterior envelope that may address some of those issues that he's referring to, but I just haven't
Okay.
seen it.
So it's, I will certainly research the question of the legal transfer. Because the capital plan is operated, board members, as one capital plan rather than having any real kind of coordination around, it's operated through the state mechanism, even for OPSB buildings. And so I'm not sure that the coordinating suggestion around governance that you proposed is going to actually resolve the issues mentioned here. I think it strikes me more as an issue of day-to-day logistics. I'm going to request a report, Superintendent Dobart and Ms. Hankins, from you as to whether this has been communicated to you in the past, to your division, what agreements have been made, and what the status of executing on those agreements is. And to the board, we will then come back, if it's acceptable to you, Mr. Chairman, and provide a report at the next meeting.
Please do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that satisfy you where
Yes,
you guys are?
that does.
Okay, good. And it would be greatly helpful, Superintendent Dobart, if your team would meet with the Einstein team in the immediate, so that we can just establish clarity on these other items. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Board members, do we have any questions on these issues? Okay, hearing none, do we have any objections to the motion to receive the report? Hearing,
Mr. Chairman, it will.
Mr. Lee.
In effect, it includes the comments we've just heard.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, hearing no objections, the motion carries. Now we go to Ms. Dastug's other motion.
Well, I'm not going to make the motion. I was going to ask department staff to maybe give us some briefing, and I think another board member is going to make the motion, but the information has been provided to the board members. So.
Okay. Do we need a motion on the floor in order to address this issue?
I'll make the motion. I approve the change order for site containments and procedures per LDEQ protocol for selective demolition of Booker T. Washington High School Annex and accessory buildings, not to exceed $180,000 pending determination of the final amount, and that we also authorize the BESE president and co-chairs of the School Improvement and Turnaround Committee to approve the final amount of the change order.
The final actions will then be reported to the School and Innovation and Turnaround Committee as a part of the RSD's monthly capital projects update report at our next regularly scheduled committee meeting.
Okay, we have that motion on, we have that motion, we have a second to that motion.
Why don't you read the second last time? Director Armstrong.
Also to direct the RSD to submit the approved change order for consideration and approval at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget.
Okay, with that correction, do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Gio? Let's hear from the department,
Sure.
please.
So we've been doing soil samples on some of our sites that we anticipate constructing on to try to get a heads up as to what if there's any issues. And Booker T. Washington is one of those projects where we're demolishing the classroom and the annex and restoring the historic auditorium and are going to build new. Back in the 40s when Booker T. Washington was originally built, it was built on the site of a New Orleans city dump. We found higher than normal levels of lead and other heavy metals. So in order to demolish the building, there's protective protocols that the contractor needs to perform in order to protect his employees as well as the soil, the contaminated soil from spreading to other parts of the city. While we're negotiating, we know what the max value will be, not to exceed 180. We're trying to negotiate that dollar value down. That's just to manage the demolition process. We will then, once we understand the true scope of work, put out to bid a cleanup process before we construct the new high school.
Okay.
And what, may I ask a question?
Mr. Romer?
What is the amount of, the current amount of the total contract on that site? I can't, you know?
So the total project budget is somewhere about $56 million to construct the new school.
Okay.
The
Thank you.
demolition itself that is included in that number.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Mr. Astug, are there any other motions on,
Not that
related
I'm
to this
aware of.
topic?
No, sir.
Okay. Next item, please.
Next item is on page 55, item 3.2, consideration of Recovery School District Early Head Start issues. The department recommendation is to, number 1, receive, and for recommendations 2 through 4 to approve, as outlined in the exec rec. 55, page 55.
Okay, do we have a motion? Mr. Astug?
I'll make a motion to receive item 1 and approve items 2 through 4.
Do we have a second? Ms. Bradford? Do we have any questions from board members? Ms. Bradford?
I have already talked with our executive director about this, but it's unusual for a state board to be sitting as the authorizing board, or the administrative board, rather, of a project like this. So my direction to Ms. Hozad was that we be sure that we have someone on BESE who is staff who is well-versed in understanding and attending these meetings and has knowledge so that we are having a representative presence when we are looking at these issues, and so that in the future, rather than just having this volume of information for us, that we can have it broken down in a way that we can truly give oversight.
Ms. Bradford, are you looking for a comment from BESE staff?
No, I just am making that comment for the record.
Okay. Mr. Astug?
I'd just like to note that I did do an interview with a team that came in, and in the process of prepping for that interview and also of the interview, really impressed with the amount of progress that we have made in establishing and performing our role, you know, as the governing agency for the Early Head Start for this grant. I don't know if you took a chance to look at the Ms. Machute's resume, but she has a tremendous amount of experience, worked under Pat Cooper at the Early Childhood and Family Center at Mahalia-Jackson, which, if any of you visited, is just a phenomenal place. So I feel very comfortable that that we are going in the right direction with this. And Catherine Posniak, our executive director, has been very actively engaged representing the board in these meetings. I would like to suggest that any BESE member that really would like to engage in this area, Ms. Orange-Jones, this is, I think, a perfect opportunity to do so and then report back to the board, would really serve this board well. Absolutely will.
And I think Bessie staff would really appreciate that, too.
Yeah.
Okay, any further comments from Bessie members? Hearing none, any objections to the motion? Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Frank Buckley?
Okay, my
Yes,
name is
sir.
Frank Buckley. I'm a conscious, concerned citizen from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I'm concerned about this Head Start program. I have an article I'd like to read to the board. Pre-K student dies in class at Gentilly School. Cause is unknown, no violence cited, by Andrew Vandercourt. A pre-kindergarten student at Mary D. Coghill Elementary School dies in the classroom last month for reasons that are still under investigation. According to officials with the Recovery School District, Superintendent Patrick Dobar said the cause of death is still unknown. For privacy reasons, the district is withholding the child's identity and the exact circumstances of the death. But Patrick Dobar says no violence was involved and there was no reason to call in police. The child required special accommodations and had a history of medical challenges, he said. Now, concerned, conscious citizen, let me give you the timeline of this article. On March the 30th, I received a telephone call from a parent that had a child in the classroom. And the parent asked me, did I hear of the child that died at Coghill? And I said no. On March 31st, I host a radio show called What's Going On with Coach Frank, and I brought this up. And if you have a problem with a child and you need to talk to a parent, you need to get in touch with Karen Harper Royal. So I talked to Karen. I said, Karen, did you hear? Karen said yes. A parent told her that her child was in the same classroom where the child died. The boy name is Latrell Chapman. He was 3 years old. He died on March the 19th. Lady called me on March the 30th. I talked about it on a radio show March the 31st. This article comes out April 3rd. And this man says there was no need to call the police. As a teacher, if a child comes to my class with a bruise on him or her, I have to report it. We have a dead body in a pre-kindergarten classroom, and Patrick Dobar says there's no reason to call the police. And the people in the community did not hear the story until I put it on the radio. The only people knew about it was the people that were in the classroom. And we want these people to continue to run the Recovery School District?
May I respond?
Yes.
Patrick Dover, Superintendent Recovery School District, Mr. Chairman, committee members. So just a couple of things for proper context. So one, the incident was an extremely tragic and unfortunate incident. RSD security was immediately at the site, as well as paramedics. The instructor was a trained, licensed professional, tried to resuscitate the child. And we can't go into too many details right now because, again, still there's investigation as far as just the cause of death. And so I don't want to violate those privacy laws. Immediately that night, I went to the mother's home myself and Dr. Corey Abel of the RSD. We talked with the mother. She was appreciative of the efforts that we put forth. And we met with the faculty, the staff, and has been at the school. As far as the timing, when untimely demise such as this occurs, as in the past, we don't go and put out reports to the newspaper or actively seek and do that. So the Times-Picayune chose not to, or when it was reported to them, or when they found out. So as far as the 2 or 3 week lag in the story, so to speak, that's a media issue. But my pressing concern is always about the families, about the children, and that's what we address. We handled it appropriately, and so that's what I just want to be able to put that into context for you. And I don't know if Fran had anything else you would like to add, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me. Yes,
I
ma'am.
do have a couple of programmatic distinctions I'd like to make.
And
Thank you,
can we get your
Patrick.
name for the record?
I'm
please?
sorry, Francesca Williams. I'm the Early Childhood Director for the Recovery School District. And I appreciate Mr. Buckley's concern. I want to just make the distinction that the item that is before the board right now is the Early Head Start program, which is an extremely distinct program from the class in which this tragedy occurred. And I also should point out that in our district, we meet the obligation of serving many students with high medical needs in our preschool program. And that is the program in which this tragedy occurred. We have students who come into our classes only after receiving medical clearance from a physician. And many students in that setting in our 3-year-old program are those students who would not be otherwise received into programs or districts that don't feel comfortable teaching students with high medical needs. So I have to make that point. That's also a program that is completely distinct from our Early Head Start program. We also recognize how precious our students, all of our students, but particularly our young students are. So when we designed our Early Head Start program and made that, took on the challenge of serving very young children, we sought out experienced early childhood professionals in the community, and that is where all of our Early Head Start students are being served right now until we feel comfortable serving students who are infants and toddlers in our district schools, and we're working very hard to reach that point, and Ms. Dastuk pointed out the progress that we're making in that effort. So I just want to make sure that I don't want to minimize the incident that Mr. Buckley is referencing, but I also want to make sure that everyone in the room understands that that is a program that is very distinct from the one that the board is considering right now.
Mr. Dobart, a question. Sometimes in situations like this, my understanding is that the coroner's office is notified?
Yes, all the appropriate authorities were notified on that. So the reference to an investigation, that was as to an investigation as if it was foul play.
So the coroner's office was notified?
Yes,
that's a public
exactly.
official?
Yes.
My understanding is that the Times-Picayune monitors the activities of coroner's office?
I'm not aware if they do or don't, but that could be possible, yes.
My understanding is that they do, and
Yes.
if they had found this to be of an issue that they wanted to report on, they probably would have. BESE members, do we have any questions?
I do.
Ms. Hill?
I guess this would be for Ms. Williams. I hear that you say that with this program that you guys service a highly medical need children. And I guess from a social worker perspective, in this program, are there services that are supported to actually make sure that these children have their the services that they need?
Absolutely. We have several registered nurses on our in our district, as well as Patrick mentioned Corey Hebert, who's our medical director. I'm a physician myself. We make sure that we have extensive review and preparation for the students to enter our programs. Unfortunately, many of them come in with diagnoses that are very severe.
Correct.
And despite our efforts, we make sure that all of our students have health plans in place. We have a nurse who is experienced as being a community healthcare nurse in child care centers. She works with parents individually. She goes to doctor's appointments with them, and she did everything that she was supposed to do with this particular student before we were able to admit him to our district, and with all of the students that have high medical needs. And these are students who are served under our early intervention program. So they go through all of the processes that are in intervention services, namely an extensive educational evaluation that is done that involves nursing professionals, and then an IEP that's developed. So we meet with medical professionals, with the parents. We go through all the steps that need to be taken to make sure that services are in place for those students.
Okay.
Okay, can
All right,
first,
members?
two things.
Wait. Ms. Bophy?
So, as a mom of a young child, I'm curious about how we would go about notifying parents of the other children in the room. And I can tell you, I don't know anything about this context, and I'm not sure how much of it that you can discuss for privacy issues, but do we have any policies about that particular scenario?
Yes,
Are we talking about 3-year-olds who are in the room? Because if my 3-year-old was in the room and a child passed away, then he would have some major questions, especially even with all of these officials coming to the scene. And so I can see some merit in communicating the fact that this has taken place so that the other families can deal with the issue appropriately.
Yes, and I share your sentiment. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old as well. And so my immediate thoughts is to the family and notifying. We do have protocols. The school, they did notify the parents in the classroom. It was at the end of the day, and the mother did come to pick the child up. Well, it was in the afternoon, early afternoon rather. And so yes, the parents were notified. We had a number of counselors at the school the next morning, as well as making sure that we communicated with the parents that evening to let them know if they needed any additional assistance. And I tell you, I went to the school a few days after. Actually, I talked to the parents that night, met with them that night, and the environment and the way that it is just incredible. So at Cog Hill, it was functioning well. Again, it's unfortunate, and also the kids basically that we're serving, particularly with those challenges, those health issue challenges, it's almost like they're a family. And not to say that, when you lose a child, regardless of the circumstance, it's difficult, and so we have those protocols in place to notify, yes.
I also want to add that the district did a wonderful job with making sure that social workers were on site immediately, embedded in the classroom and at the school for both the young children and the parents and the teachers, because these were caregivers, several caregivers. We overstaffed these classes to make sure that there are numerous adults in the room so that we have a high student-teacher ratio, and the teachers were obviously very much affected by the event, so we had social workers embedded in the classroom and on site for several days immediately after the incident so that they could answer questions that children, staff members, and parents had.
Thank you.
Ms. Hill? Okay. Mr. Roman?
She answered my question, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Buckley.
Okay, first of all, I still haven't heard the need not to call 911 and have the police come. Second of all, Patrick Dobar knows that the paper mentioned that Cog Hill are housing kids 6.5 years after Katrina in trailers. And the trailer that kid died in was a trailer that was moved from the vacant site of Kennedy High School and brought to Cog Hill, which probably has mold in it. Because when I taught there, some days the teachers had to go home because we were sick from inhaling mold. Now, if you have a 3-year-old that has health conditions, why would you put a child in a trailer that has mold in it? And I'm getting sick and tired of hearing this foolishness coming from the Recovery School District. They are failing our children. Our children are dying. I reported last December about cheating at the school to John White. John White said he wasn't going to investigate. What's going on here? We are destroying the communities in New Orleans. Now a child is dead and they can't call 911. You got schools still housed in trailers. There's $57 million to build a new Carver, and those high school students are still in trailers. We are playing education. We're playing school with this Recovery School District. And I'm sick and tired of seeing my community struggle. And then you start putting faces to try to satisfy us. Let's get an African-American superintendent. He's not doing anything.
Mr. Chairman,
he's lying in deceit.
Chairman, the speaker is out of order. I ask that you do something.
We have gone beyond the 2 minutes. Thank you. Any comments, BESE members? Mr. Lee?
I'm not sure this, while I understand the significance of this, I'm not sure it's an item that's on the agenda.
It's not.
And it's not part of this particular consideration, and I don't want us to lose sight that this early...
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir.
This early
Mr. Lee? Excuse me, sir.
No, I'm sorry. I was not trying to be controversial. If I may finish my comment.
Mr. Lee?
The early childhood program is very, very important. It looks to me like it's been well put together, and I appreciate the leadership and the effort and the need for the early childhood program. And I just don't want us to lose sight of the proposal that's before us.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
And I just, for
Mr.
factual information, so the modulars that were moved to the Cog Hill site, they were tested for any type of mold, and all those modulars are completely safe, and we've done our due diligence. And there's a new state-of-the-art building less than 2 blocks away that school will move into this fall. And so they're doing wonderful things there, and again, an unfortunate situation that happens statewide, not just in the Recovery School District. So that's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item. Oh, I'm sorry, wait a second. Do we have a motion on the floor? Yeah. Do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Next item is item 4.1. And that's on page 135. Consideration of revisions to Bulletin 129, the Recovery School District, to provide for the use of a unified RSD hearing office for Type 5 charter schools regarding student expulsion hearings. The department recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
Do we have a motion?
I so
Ms.
move.
Gio, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Dastu? Do we have any questions from board members? Any comments? Would the staff like to comment? Okay. Do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
That concludes the agenda.